Hi, and welcome to the next episode of our podcast. We spend enormous amount of time deliberating about curriculum, infrastructure, and technology. But rarely do we stop and ask, what about the teachers who are standing in front of the children? And today, we're going to talk about how teacher empowerment can lead to systemic student transformation. And to talk to me about this, I have Mainak, who's the co-founder of Simple Education Foundation. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mainak now for a few years. And I know that Mainak works very deeply with the teachers, with the government school, and the entire government ecosystem. So I'm quite hopeful that this conversation will bring out wonderful insights for me and the audience. And just to also share with you, the typical audience that we have are people from other NGOs, CSR who are working in the education, and also state education department officials. So to begin with, Menak, you have been close to the realities of education reforms over the years. And when you hear about the national conversation around education changing or transforming, what's the one conversation you feel is still missing?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think, and also for having this conversation, because I think this is a conversation that we often miss from the time that I can think of. And we've gone back on a lot of the policies and commission reports and everything that has come out. I can very confidently say that every single national education policy or any commission report on education that has come out in India in the last 3 decades, each of those reports have mentioned teacher education and teacher support as a key element of education transformation. But unfortunately, we've not had a mission that has worked to support that. And that is really the truth of the matter. Um, I think there is a lot of work that needs to happen in the teacher education space and the teacher support space where there is very little. It is a difficult space, which is probably also why most people tend to avoid it and they find other solutions that will probably give them like a faster result. And I think that chasing for faster results have actually like slowed us down because we've only gone back uh, in like the larger learning outcomes and education as a country.
So one thing is pretty clear that system does recognize teacher as someone important in the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But how do they view teachers as of today? I mean, what assumptions are built into policies, training models, or monitoring structures, as a result of which we are still to see actual transformation happening? Are they assuming that because we have put up a hardware or we have provided TRM to the teachers will be able to use it on their own? What kind of assumptions are people carrying because of which, while there's a mention, but as you rightly said, there's no action on the ground?
So I think I'll just start from the top of your question. Unfortunately, teachers are today viewed just as resources, right? They are at a very internal, like a deep level. If we see, a teacher is not viewed any different than a machine in the system. And hence, a lot of focus then becomes on, what kind of tools can be given to them, what kind of training can be given to them to do a certain task or a certain work. There's almost no recognition or acknowledgement of the wisdom that a teacher carries inside the classroom, the wisdom of what they have learned, the wisdom of their experience. A lot of our teachers are also parents themselves. So, the wisdom of being a parent, all of those things, and the wisdom of also seeing systems for long term. A lot of our teachers, an average teacher today in India, has spent at least 2 decades in the classroom. So, the wisdom of being in classroom for so long, right, irrespective of whatever your outcome in the classroom is, just by virtue of the time you've spent in the classroom, there are things that you understand about the system, about the classroom, about children, that is completely overlooked. And that's really one of the core problems. Today teachers are not consulted for the solutions that are created for them. They're not consulted for things that they are supposed to deliver in the classroom. They are just being told, okay, this is what you need to do, this is how you do it. There is very little space for feedback from them on those things. So those are, I think, a lot of those critical challenges that we need to really work on, figure out.
And I think some of it stems from perhaps a lack of understanding of what actually a day for a teacher looks like. So when I had started, I remember I had this picture in my mind, teachers in the classroom actively engaging with the children and teaching them. But when I started visiting the government schools, I got a very different picture. And you have, I know, been working with the government school teachers very deeply. Today, if you can also talk about maybe slightly urban rural context as well, what does a typical day for a teacher look like in a government school? Does it only involve teaching or does it involve multiple other things?
I think a lot of people who are listening to us probably know this in many ways already, but I'll give you a broad gist. A typical school day for a child is around 5 to 6 hours based on which state you are in. In some states, especially down in south, it's a little longer, but you can say an average of 5 to 6 hours a day, which means the teacher is at least in the school for that time. In that duration, one of the core things that the teacher has to do is obviously teach. But the school is an organization in itself, right? So it has its operational responsibilities, there are administrative responsibilities. A public school is also a recipient of different grants from the government, be it from the SSA or from the SCRT or from other schemes that are ongoing. All of these things, and these are, I'm just starting to sort of touch the surface of things. All of these are the teacher's responsibility. Typically, a government school in India does not have an administrative staff. So the principal and the teacher, and in many cases, the principal is also a teacher in the school. It is their responsibility to ensure that all the data that needs to be collected, from daily attendance to student enrollment, all of that is stored properly. On a daily basis, there is midday meal, there is other administrative asks that come to them on a daily basis. All of that needs to be tended to. Other than that, there are grants that they get, so grant reporting, utilization of all of that. Anything that is happening in the school, from a leaky tap to the electricity going out to a bench being broken, ensuring that that is safe for the child, that is the school's responsibility. Ensuring that the gate is closed, so that no one can just walk inside the school. All of that, in many ways, that is a teacher's responsibility today, and that actually takes significant amount of their time. And these are all everything that is in the school. There are also things outside the school. Teachers, apart from the education department, teachers work on census, voting, RTI requests, and a lot of other things. Like, for example, a lot of states run campaigns like drug de-addiction and similar campaigns over. And teachers are also people who are recruited to anchor these campaigns in their blocks, in their clusters that they are in. Uh, because in many ways, the RTE, what it has done is it has ensured that there is a school almost in every corner of the country, which means that there is at least one government employee in every corner of the country. So if there is anything that needs to be done, that will be done through them, right? So that becomes another added responsibility. I would say that of the 5 hours or 6 hours the teacher gets in the school, the teacher spends all, if not more, at least 25 to 40% of their time in doing all of these duties on an average. And then on top of it, today, with interventions by different organizations including ours, there are sort of training programs that they have to attend. There is a horde of data collection apps that every organization has, which the teacher has to fill, because we all have our MOUs with the government, and the bureaucracy is pushing for the filling of those data collection tools also. So all of that come on the teacher. And then once they're done with all of this, they go home. There is caregiving responsibilities that almost every teacher in the country has, that's there, and then preparing for their classroom. So a teacher actually has a pretty packed day, of which very little is actually teaching, unfortunately.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think it was important to bring that out because funders need to understand that if you're planning for intervention in the government schools, this very conscious understanding of the teacher's schedule has to be taken into consideration in my view.
Absolutely.
Because, for example, like something that we experience a lot, when you set up a hardware in a government school, if you don't provide them access to offline content, And if you're expecting the teacher to either download the content from YouTube or in the class itself, connect the device with the internet, figure out which video to show to my children or which activity to do with my children, that never happens.
Absolutely.
Right. And that is why it is important that whatever solution, whether technology or otherwise, goes into the government school, actually goes in a way that it actually empowers the teacher rather than making their life more complicated.
Absolutely.
Right. But the ecosystem, unfortunately, has limited understanding of this.
Absolutely. And I think where there is an understanding, the problem is that there is this use of this language that we are seeing today. It is called idiot proof tools for teachers. And that actually is very a wrong way of looking at things. What you are saying is that how do we build tools or solutions that recognize the challenges of the teachers? Because we understand who the teachers are and the problems they face. When we change the language to saying that we need idiot proof tools, we actually are saying that there are idiots in the classroom who are leading our classrooms. We need tools that they can use. And just by changing the language, actually we will change the tools, we will change our approach inside the school, inside the classroom, in our conversation with the teachers. So it's very important for that framing is kept and we ground our interventions in that.
Let's take this conversation a little deeper because you have often talked about teacher identity, right? How teachers see themselves and whether the system makes them feel seen or not, right? Because in the earlier part of the conversation, you mentioned the teachers are very rarely consulted with about what is happening inside the classroom, what solutions are they being given, right? So you've actually, I was reading, I think on LinkedIn, that you have actually spoken about dignity not as a soft idea, but as something which is foundational to transformation, right? So could you share why does a teacher's sense of dignity and self-worth directly affects what happens inside the classroom?
I think it is um, it is human nature. When we feel respected somewhere, we show up better at that place. It is human nature. In our system today, unfortunately, teachers are not receiving the kind of respect that they should receive. The dignity of the profession is getting hampered a lot. I remember reading a article in during COVID where teachers were given the duty of managing queues outside government liquor shop. When you do things like this, and when in a public forum someone who is at a certain position of power say that we are making idiot proof materials for teachers and things like that, that sort of societally degrades teaching as a profession. What that leads to is that not a lot of young people want to become teachers. People who are in the system get demotivated. And that's a very big challenge. Today, when a teacher goes inside the classroom and when they are told that they have to use a certain tool, one of the reasons that they want to use the tool is because they feel that someone who's designed this tool for me has my good intention in mind. But if largely we know that the system does not have good intentions in mind, there is no motivation for the teacher to use this tool, right? And then they don't use that tool, and it's then that creation of that cycle in which we get stuck, and then we continue to say that teachers don't do what is expected of them. But that's not true. And I have a personal example of this. When my grandmother was a teacher, all my aunts are teachers in government schools, and in my family it was really celebrated that we have so many teachers, because it meant that there is a certain kind of knowledge system that the family has been able to create, that we have so many people who are gurus. Versus when I decided to become a teacher, almost everyone flipped, because they're like, why are you going to become a teacher? You can do so many better things in life. Just that framing of you can do better things in life and than teaching is disrespectful to the profession, is disrespectful to people who've become teachers already. And that I've seen that over the last couple of decades, the respect that we give to teachers have slowly gone down. And that, until and unless we change that, I think it will become very difficult for us to continue to attract teachers, have good teachers in the classroom. And I can for once say that I am not very hopeful about AI fully solving that gap.
Same here.
Yeah.
But any thoughts on how can we build this? How can the state build it, for example?
I think the first thing is giving platforms for teachers to share what they feel is going wrong, right? Like you and I both run organizations. We know when things break down, one of the things that we love doing is let's do an open house. Let's talk to our team members, figure out what is going wrong. That's something that I think governments need to do. Talk to teachers and not talk to people like us and ask us what is going wrong, because 90% organizations will actually give you responses on the basis of reports they have read. Not many will actually go down to teachers and ask the teachers, which they should. So first starting point is ask teachers what is wrong. If ASR is not improving, if other things are not improving, what is wrong? Second is, I think there has to be more public acknowledgements of the role of teachers. And we've seen this, right? We've seen when ministers, be it education chief or prime ministers, when they talk about teachers and the work that teachers do and they motivate teachers, they go to schools, appreciate teachers and the work that they are doing. We've seen that in those states, the teachers start feeling proud of the work that they do. There is pride involved. So that's, I think, the second thing that needs to happen. And the third thing, what I would say is that we need to probably start building systems within the education sort of system where we acknowledge that the teacher's primary role is to teach. Hence, can we get these other administrative duties out? And I'm really happy. I just sort of, as I was coming here, I was reading an article where I think one of the state governments in India have decided that over the next 3 years, they will slowly roll back on all the administrative duties that teachers have to, you know, do now. So I hope that more states take that action and our teachers get more time inside the classroom.
Let's talk about the teacher training aspect
Yes.
a bit. Although I know that in many, from technology's point of view, I know that various technology interventions which happen in the government school, training is a very small line item in those. But in the NGO ecosystem and even perhaps in the CSR ecosystem, a lot of teacher training does happen. Right. And I think the state also has a mandate to do certain hours of teacher training every year. But to my understanding, despite all of this teacher training happening, classroom transformation, the true way that you and I envision, is still very limited. Where is the gap? I mean, what is the gap in this teacher training, and how, according to you, an ideal teacher training should look like?
So, great question. First of all, I think the first gap is on relevancy. So, because there is a mandate of 50 hours of training, out of which 10 hours is done centrally by NCRT and the remaining 40 hours is the state's sort of duty. Because there is this big number on top of the head, like every state's head, there is some of the other training that goes out. And often the outcome is to fill the 40 hours, not to ensure that the teachers are actually getting the skills or competencies that they need. Now, if I go a step back, the state actually does not only the state, but even big private institutes and schools also do not have the mechanisms to actually understand where those competency gaps are. Like a teacher in my school, what are they good at? What are they struggling with? What do they need support with? There is almost no data around this. If I go even a step further back, actually there is very little data that states have to very clearly say that in my state, given the context of my state, the culture, the geography, the economic and social status of my state, these are critical classroom practices that are required. So, to give you an example, in Delhi, we have significant number of teachers in every school, right? So you will mostly find a teacher in a class. If you go to a rural school, for that matter in Uttarakhand, you will see the same teacher actually managing more than 2 classrooms. So the pedagogical approach in Delhi and in Uttarakhand is very different. The state's understanding of that is the starting point, from where then they will decide that how much do our teachers know, where do we need to support them, and how. And then they design the training programs. That whole loop, whole sort of chain is broken today. So that's one core problem. And because the chain is broken, any and every kind of training is going on. And the second sort of problem is also that is a lot of training today happens on the tool that is getting implemented. So if it is a certain curriculum, then the training will happen on how to implement that curriculum. But we know that for a curriculum to actually thrive in a classroom, the teacher not only needs knowledge of the curriculum, but they also need knowledge of how do children learn, how to manage a classroom, how to manage a classroom where students are different learning levels. All of those things the teachers need to know. Those are aspects that are not covered in most of the trainings that go out. So today, if you look at a lot of the NGOs or a lot of the CSR pushed trainings, you will notice that a lot of the training is on STEM, or a lot of that training is on climate, or a lot of that training is on something very specific, in which most of the interaction is at a knowledge level, where they will talk about STEM or talk about climate or about whatever they are doing. They will not talk about how to inculcate scientific inquiry in the student. What kind of questioning needs to happen for students to start thinking critically, right? That's not going to be a part of the larger STEM program. And that is where the gaps emerge. And when you talk about learning outcomes, that is where the gap emerges, because we've now taught the person how to use this tool, but the person actually does not know the surround how to build the ecosystem for the tool to thrive, right? It is like that I have taught someone how to use this mic, but I have not given them an electric connection. So no matter how well I know how to use and repair this mic, it will be useless because I don't have electric connection. So that whole ecosystem of support and in the training that coming out is not happening. And what that leads to is the teachers go and try to use this tool, then they feel demotivated because the electricity connection is not there. What will I do? Like you said, they have put the hardware, but there's no internet.
Right.
So they automatically feel demotivated. And then that sort of keeps trickling down to a classroom where we see learning not happening.
Right. I think one more reason is that the trainings are often considered as a one-time event.
Absolutely.
Right. While teachers, I believe, do require continuous handholding
Absolutely.
and a support mechanism which is available to them as required.
Absolutely. And we have actually found that that is the most effective teacher development intervention that you can do. We call it coaching. So we ensure that when we work with a state, can we work with the state to actually recruit a cadre of coaches who can go inside the classroom and provide one-on-one support to the teachers? Because even within that, you might have noticed that some of the teachers who are using an iDream solution might be fully aware of how to use the machine, but their struggle is with finding the right lesson, versus someone might be able to find the right lesson, but they're struggling with the remote, right? There are two different. So there you need a personalized sort of person getting inside the classroom and telling them, okay, what's your problem? Let me solve it for you. Let me give you some feedback. So that we found actually very, very effective. And we very strongly believe that if of the 40 hours, at least 10 hours can be done through direct coaching and feedback to the teacher, the returns on the 30 hours that you've done, or the returns on learning just overall for a class, will be much higher.
Mainak, could you also walk us through what Simple Education Foundation does on the ground?
Absolutely. So I think we believe that the future of India depends on the children who are in schools today. And for them to really have a life where they are thriving and hence the country is thriving, we need to ensure that they are learning. And they'll only learn when they have a skilled, loving, intuitive teacher in the classroom who is not only able to teach them well, but is also able to build a bond where they have motivation to learn, right? Where they feel safe to go to school every day. And that's very critical. We partner with state and local governments like municipal corporations or SCRTs and diets and DOEs to help and support these institutions to create large scale teacher development programs, which include training, which include coaching, which include access to various tools, some of which are created by us, some of which are created by our partners, some of which are open source, easily freely available, and things like that. How do we ensure that all these three pieces are there so that the teacher has the full support ecosystem around them? And on a second layer, we also work with the state to ensure that the state has the capacity to actually build these three things on their own as well. Because we know that the state is actually much more stronger than we are in terms of the kind of resources that they have access to. So if we can partner with the state in a way where we can help them develop some of the competencies or capacities to actually build a high quality teacher development program themselves, and we are able to get out of the system over time, then that is the kind of impact that we really want. And today we are working with three states, Delhi, Uttarakhand and Punjab, working with close to 250,000 teachers. And I think really excited about this year, um, and also the future of schooling in India.
Can I ask you to share maybe a story of transformation which inspires you and your team at SEF?
I think there are many of these stories. I think one of the story that I keep going back to a lot is a story from a very early day. This was 2017. We had just started working in a school in Delhi, and when we went into the school, the principal and some of the teachers were very excited about the intervention, which is where we decided that we'll work with them. And our intervention model was slightly different back in the day. This is, I'm saying, about 10 years ago. And but there was one particular teacher with whom we had to work because she was teaching grade 1 and we wanted to start our intervention from grade 1. And she was not ready to work with us at all. She had been a teacher for about 2 decades. She knew what she wanted to do. And every time we wanted to work with her, we faced a lot of resistance from her. But what we decided was we'll keep pushing, we'll keep trying to forge a partnership. And while we do that, we'll also ensure that we are continuing to work with the children. What I noticed is that in a few months, what happened is the teacher saw, she saw that we were doing our best inside the classroom. She saw that students were actually starting to learn in the areas that we were managing inside the classroom. And she started to warm up. And we worked in that school for about 5 years. By the end of our sort of term in that school, she was one of our champions. She was a teacher we learned a lot from. She used to pick up tools that we would bring in, work with us to improve the tools so that more government teachers can use it, which was also one of our aim. And we saw her completely turn around in terms of the motivation she had to teach. She just, by having access to tools, by having access to very specific coaching, specific training, and access to people who acknowledge the effort she was putting in, we saw her change like 180 degree. And it was such a joy to watch her teach. I still feel she's probably one of the most powerful government school teachers I have seen teaching. Unfortunately, she's not teaching anymore. She's transitioned out of her role right after COVID. But it was such a joy to see her. And I think it's one of my best turnaround stories, and also something that really underlines the principle at SEF that we will keep showing up for our teachers, and we know that they will see the effort and they will also pick up the tools, and once they do, they will create magic.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wonderful. My last question to you, Mainak, may have an obvious answer, but I still like to hear that from you. When you genuinely work on teacher empowerment,
Yeah.
what kind of changes do you see in the students?
As in the impact that we are seeing in students
In the
today?
students, yeah. I can say that the obvious answer which I was referring to was that if you are empowering teacher, they're improving the classroom, perhaps student engagement goes up, learning outcome improves, right? It has an obvious answer, but what have you observed?
I think obvious answers are definitely learning outcomes go up, student engagement, absenteeism go down. All of these things definitely happen. What we've seen, this is a trend that we've noticed in Uttarakhand, where we've been working for the last 11 years now. One of the trends that we've noticed is in the communities that we work in, girls are getting married later because more girls are going to college, they're completing school. Now, when they struggle with the class, they have support in the community. We've seen parents actually change their work. So in Uttarakhand, we work with a one Gujar community who actually are nomadic people. And for the last several years, they have moved from one part of Uttarakhand to the other part in summers and winters. But over the last 3 years, this community, one of these communities, have actually stationed themselves around one of the schools that we work with, because they are seeing that the teaching that is happening and the way their kids are learning in this school is something that they are also finding value in. So they've stopped moving, and they've changed some of their professional sort of approaches also, so that they can stay back in the village. I think these are things that we've seen where parent engagement has gone up because as teacher has consistently shown up. I think these are softer elements for sure. Yeah,
Wonderful. I think the biggest takeaway for me from this conversation is that teacher transformation is a human problem,
absolutely.
right? And it can be solved by making people inside the classroom feel trusted, respected, and empowered.
Absolutely.
Right? And once we set the basic, I believe student transformation that we are all hoping for will also start coming in as a very, very natural. It will not be forced. It can start happening in a very natural and a very joyful, beautiful way.
Absolutely.
And that's what we would like to achieve. Right?
Absolutely.
Great. Wonderful talking to you, Mainak. And
Thank
I
you so much.
generally want to thank you and wish you all the best for the wonderful work that you guys are doing at SCF.
Thank you. And all the best to you too.
Thank you.